She's sweet like cinnamon rolls. She tries to hide it, but Lord knows it
Okay,
shows.
now for some of the best cinnamon rolls you'll ever taste. I used to work in a cinnamon roll shop in a mall, and I learned some really good tricks. I had made cinnamon rolls before, but I learned some tricks that I want to pass on to you to make your cinnamon rolls extra, extra good. Now, your cinnamon roll dough is a much softer dough than your bread dough. And there's some techniques that we're going to use that are a little bit different. And I'm going to demonstrate it with my mixer rather than the other mixer, my bread mixer. You can do it in the bread mixer, and that's what I usually use, but I'm going to demonstrate it without that right now. So this particular recipe, we're going to add all the wet ingredients. Now, we'll add 3 eggs. Now, ideally, you should have your eggs at room temperature. But if you don't, it's not critical. Okay, so we have our 3 eggs. Okay, so we're going to beat up our 3 eggs. Just beat them up nice and good. Now we're going to add 2 cups of milk, and this milk I have heated in the microwave until it's quite warm. Okay, be quite warm to your touch. Not scalding by any means, but very warm. So 2 cups of milk, and then we have one of the secret ingredients is mashed potatoes. I have tried this with dried potatoes, flaked potatoes, and I just don't think this is good. There's something about the liquid that's in the potatoes that I think makes your dough just extra soft. And so what you want to do is add about a cup of mashed potatoes. Now, one of the best ways to do this is when you have your Sunday dinner and you have mashed potatoes, just save out about a cup and put it in the freezer. And that way you'll have the mashed potatoes when you want them. These particular mashed potatoes, I just peeled 1 potato and mashed it this morning along with the liquid. And so we have our mashed potatoes. And then we're going to add a half a tablespoon of salt and a half a cup of sugar, and then 3/4 of a cup of melted butter. And you need to use real butter. You can't scrimp. Then you're going to mix that up. Now we're going to start adding our flour. And we're going to add about half of our flour. And that's going to probably be about 5 cups with this amount. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Actually, I think I'll just add 4 cups. We're going to mix that up. You want it still to be quite liquidy because you're going to add your yeast. And your yeast needs liquid to dissolve in. Okay, so that's nice and gooey. Now we're going to add 2 tablespoons of yeast. There's no need to dissolve this yeast ahead of time in warm water. It's an instant yeast and it will dissolve in this liquid just as well as it would in warm water. So we're going to mix it really well. So I still think that I could add another cup of flour and use my mixer. As soon as it becomes too difficult for my mixer, then we'll go to a wooden spoon. But I think I can get 1 more cup in. So now we've got 5 cups of flour. So it's starting to be a little bit difficult for my mixer. So I think we'll now go to our wooden spoon. And we'll just mix in as much flour as we can that way, and then we will go by hand. But our whole goal is to add as little flour as possible. we're going to add our flour. I'm going to go ahead and add 2 cups because I know that it will take 2 cups. This is the way our grandmothers used to do it. They just had to use a lot of muscle power. Okay. Now our goal with cinnamon rolls is to add as little flour as possible. So our dough is going to be somewhat sticky, but not so sticky that we can't handle it. Okay, so it's getting kind of thick, and so I think I will go to using my hands. Let's have some more flour ready, because I know I'll need flour on my board, and a little bit of flour in my hands so they're not stick quite so much. Then we're going to kind of go around in a circle here, and we're going to knead it in here while it's still sticky, and then we'll turn it out on the board and knead it. So as you can see, it's still quite sticky, and so I do believe it's going to need a little bit more flour. So we'll just add about 1/2 cup in there. Okay, I think now I'll go ahead and put it on the board. We may just have enough flour. We'll just have to see. Again, it's a soft dough. The consistency of your dough is very important according to the product that you're trying to have at the end. Some doughs are very stiff doughs, and some we want to be very soft. And now we're going to knead it again, 1/4 turn, push it in, and just lightly knead this. Your bread dough, which I'll show in another section, we're going to knead a little bit firmly. Just put flour on as you knead it and pull the dough off your fingers when you need to. But I think that we do have enough flour in this. Okay. Yeah. Hope you can see the consistency of this. It's still a little bit sticky, but not so sticky that it sticks to the board and I can't work with it. Okay, so just push in lightly, turn it a 1/4 turn, push in lightly, 1/4 turn, lightly. Okay. Now I'm going to continue to do this for 3 or 4 minutes, whereas bread, you would knead it for a good 10 minutes. But we don't need to knead our roll dough as long as we do our bread dough. I hope you can see the technique here. It's very easy. 1/4 turn, just use both your palms and push down. Again, we're not really pushing hard. As you can see, it has a smooth texture there. So this is actually a very good consistency. Now remember, when you make your cinnamon rolls and your bread, they don't always turn out exactly the same. But that's okay. You live and you learn, and then you just perfect your own technique, and the amount of flour that you add also depends upon the humidity outside. There's a lot of variables. But it'll still work, even if you have too much flour. As you can see, it's not that sticky anymore. The flour is getting kneaded in. May put a little bit more flour in, just okay. Okay, I'm going to continue to knead this for a few minutes. We'll stop filming, and then I will put it in a bowl that I have greased. I'll show you that. And then we're going to let it raise for about an hour. And we'll let it get nice and light. And then I'll show you how to form them into rolls. See, it's in a nice round ball. And so I'm just going to pick it up. And this bowl I've sprayed with Pam. That always helps so it doesn't stick. We'll just stick it in there, and I'll cover it with a light dishcloth and put it in, I don't put it in my oven or any of those things. I just put it in a secluded spot in my kitchen and cover it with a towel. And it'll raise just fine. Okay? So in an hour, we'll roll it back out. Our dough, our cinnamon roll dough, has now risen. It's nice and light. You can stick your finger in, and anyways, it's risen for about an hour. So now we're going to roll it out into our cinnamon rolls. First of all, I'm going to remember to spray my pan with Pam, because I always forget until my hands are all doughy. Now, one of the main, most important things about making cinnamon rolls is do not punch your dough down. When I first made cinnamon rolls, I punched it down and kneaded it down, and it becomes much more difficult to roll out. So we're not going to punch it out, we're just going to put it down on our counter. Now, what we want to do is roll our dough into a long rectangle. And this is probably, I think we're going to cut this. This is probably, okay. I think what we'll do is we'll do half at a time. Now, the kind of knife that you should use is a knife with just a sharp, thin edge. Okay? Don't use a serrated knife at this point. And as thin a blade as you can get will help you cut your cinnamon rolls a little bit better. Okay, so we're going to kind of form it here. Before we even roll it out, we want to form it into a rectangle, and we want to try to get it as even as we can, height-wise. Okay? So we floured our rolling pin. Again, this is the light touch. Now, the height of your dough is really important. If you roll it too thick, your cinnamon rolls are going to be very bready. And so you'll have to experiment and decide how you like it. I like to roll mine thinner. So we've got a nice long rectangle here. Now, as best you can, get it into an even rectangle. It's not ever going to be perfect, but just try to do it as best you can. Okay. Now, I just misshapen it a little bit, didn't I? But we'll do it again. Okay, I think that's a pretty good width or height. Like I say, everybody has different preferences. If you want a real bready cinnamon roll, then roll it out thicker. Okay, the next step then is to put some butter on it. Now I'm just going to use my hands. This is soft butter. If you've forgotten to put your butter out to soften, You can always melt it and pour melted butter on and swish it around with a little pastry brush or a paper towel, whichever works. Okay, so we're going to put a nice coating of butter on. I'm probably using about, not quite a half a cube of butter. Okay, so spread that on. Wipe our hand. The next thing that goes on is brown sugar. Sprinkle your brown sugar on. This will make it nice and yummy, I promise you. And then just spread it around as evenly as you can. Press out any lumps that you see. The next step is our cinnamon and sugar mixture. Again, this is variable. I have about half a cup of sugar to a teaspoon of cinnamon. You can do it however you like. Now you're just going to sprinkle it on evenly. Okay. Now we like to put raisins in our cinnamon rolls. So that's the next step. Just sprinkle your raisins rather evenly around your dough. The next step is to roll it up. So, you're going to start at the outside edge, and you're just going to roll it very carefully. You can just watch my technique here. I kind of start at one end and go to the other end. Starts to look like a long elephant trunk. Now this has worked out well. Sometimes I don't get it as even as this, but this is quite even. Now the end of the dough, you just pull it around and just kind of pinch it. It won't stay completely, but that's okay. That's not a problem. It's all gonna grow together and taste good anyway. But you want to just kind of lightly pinch it together. Okay? So now we're going to roll it over like that and kind of smooth him out like that. Kind of tuck the ends in and make it nice and smooth. Okay? Next step is to cut it into your cinnamon rolls. And you cut it about an inch thick. And so I just eyeball it. If it's thicker, it's not a problem. Now, you have to work quickly. You're just going to go do it quick. Saw back and forth and do it quick. Actually, that's probably a little bit more than an inch. Again, you can experiment and see how you like it. This dough is really quite forgiving. I'll just cut off a little end there. And well, that's okay. Now we're going to put them in our pan. Now you're going to put 3 across. They're going to raise. And if they're, I'm going to flatten these just a little bit. Usually I do get 12 out of a roll. And that's about the right distance apart. They're going to grow together a little bit. So we have 12 on our pan. So that's how they look when you roll them out. And now we're just going to cover them with our cloth. And always make sure, don't use a terry cloth. They're a little bit heavy. Just use a light flour sack kind of cloth. You could even use saran wrap and dip it in flour so it doesn't stick. That's another thing that you can use to cover your cinnamon rolls. Okay, so now we're going to wait probably about 20 minutes, and then we'll put it in the oven, and then we'll see what happens next. This half of the cinnamon rolls, the dough that I just made, I'm going to make into a holiday wreath. This is a really fun thing to do for your friends and family at Christmas time. Just as easy as cinnamon rolls, just a little different technique, of course, to shaping it. Now, when you make a wreath for Christmas, you never make it the same shape twice. Practice makes perfect. You just have to keep practicing and discovering what works best for you, or just learn from your mistakes. This actually, as I look at it, it's quite a bit thicker at this end. So it's a little bit, not quite, maybe won't be quite as even as I like it to be. But you'll learn the technique. Next goes our brown sugar. Okay. Next goes our cinnamon sugar mixture. Now, I'm not going to put raisins on this one because my family is going to eat it, and some of them prefer not to have raisins, so we'll just do it that way. Again, we're going to start and roll it. I usually start in the middle and then roll to the end, roll to one end, and come back and roll to the other end. Okay. We're just going to gently roll it. I think you'll find with the potato in the bread that it just really makes a nice soft dough. Okay. Now we're going to take the ends and pinch them up onto our roll. I'm just going to roll that over so my seam is on the bottom. Now I have my ends are a little bit uneven here, so I'm just going to cut them off. And I can just make little tiny cinnamon rolls or munge them together and make a big cinnamon roll, whatever I want to do. Okay, so now we have our roll. Now at this point, because a wreath is a little bit difficult to move after it's been formed into a wreath, we're going to put this roll right onto our baking sheet. So here's our baking sheet, and it's been sprayed with Pam. So we're just going to lift it up there. Okay? And you have to move quickly, and you need to be a little bit careful. But then you're going to reshape it a little bit. Okay, you're going to bring the ends together. Kind of pinch them a little bit there. Okay, now this is fatter at the top, but that's okay. You can put a big bow up there if you want to, or a bow here, whichever you'd like. Okay, now we need to get our scissors, and what you're going to do is make cuts, and we'll make our first cut right there. You're going to cut almost to the end of your wreath, but not quite, and you'll make your cuts about 1 inch around. And as you do it, you can kind of pull it out a little bit. You can also make this into the shape of a candy cane. There's another technique that I'll demonstrate of how to make it into a braid. There's lots of fun things that you can do with bread and shaping it. Okay, so we've made our cuts. Now we're going to just twist them a little bit so they lay down. So you kind of fan them out a little bit. It's always a little bit tricky right where you joined your wreath, but you can make it work. You can just work with it and make it nice and pretty. Okay, so we can put it out a little bit, and there's our wreath. And we'll let that raise again for about 20 minutes, and then we'll cook it and show you how to frost in the next step. Now it's time to put our cinnamon rolls in the oven. So I'm going to have Keith give a close-up here. They have been raising for about an hour. I like to let them raise till they're nice and light. You can tell they almost are touching each other. Because we rolled the dough out kind of thin, they're not going to get too huge. But you can see that when I poke my finger in, they're pretty light. Okay, and here's our wreath. See how nicely it formed? How everything fans out really nicely, and you can tell that it's nicely raised. So we'll stick those in the oven. It takes about 20 minutes, and then we'll show you how to frost them.
She's sweet like cinnamon rolls.
Okay, our cinnamon rolls are now done. As you can see, they're just a nice golden brown. They're not too bready. And now our wreath. Okay, our wreath is also done. Now, while they're still warm, we have to make our frosting. Because you need to put the frosting on after they've been cool about 10 minutes. We're ready for our frosting for our cinnamon rolls. In this container, I have melted 1/2 cup of butter. Again, I really think you should use real butter. It just gives it that extra special taste. Now, with that, I'm just going to add about 4 cups of powdered sugar. A little bit more. Now, I don't measure, probably about a teaspoon of vanilla. And I like to use real vanilla. It might cost a little bit more, but again, I think the flavor is worth it. Now I need to get some milk. I'm going to start out with maybe 1/4 of a cup. That. As you can tell, this is not a real precise recipe. The important thing is the consistency. We need some more powdered sugar in there. I think it'll take a cup. Frosting is something that you can, if you get too much powdered sugar in, then you can put a little bit of milk in, and then if you get too much milk in, put more powdered sugar in. Pretty soon you're just really adding it up. And so I'm actually going to put a tiny bit of milk, just a tiny bit. I actually think that's a little bit too thick still, so a tiny bit more milk. that's a pretty good consistency. You want to have it a little bit runny, not as set up as cake frosting. Now, I'm going to take a tablespoonful and just rub it on there. When you put the frosting on the warm cinnamon roll, it more easily seeps down in and you have this nice warm gooey center. So about that much on each cinnamon roll, and then kind of work it on down. You don't want to completely smother them. You can if you want to, that makes it really good, but you don't have to. I think that's enough frosting myself. Okay, now we'll do our wreath. Again, we'll just spread it on and let some just down on each of the cinnamon rolls, and make sure you kind of get it inside there so it's all over. I have a boy that's 21 years old, and when I made cinnamon rolls, he would sit down and have 4 at one time. Now we're going to go back over. We're going to make sure that we have it on the inside there. Now when you give this to somebody, you're going to want to transfer it very carefully with a spatula onto another container, another sheet, perhaps a piece of cardboard that's lined with foil or something like that. Okay, so you're wanting to smother it really good. Doesn't that look good for a Christmas tree? This was our tradition to have this on Christmas morning. Always have a Christmas wreath or a Christmas braid, one or the other. Okay. Now, one thing that makes it look pretty is if you get a brush, get a pastry brush, and just kind of makes it kind of look like it's frosting on a tree or something like that. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. Now for Christmas, what you want to do is get some little sprinkles. Just lightly sprinkle it. Looks nice and Christmassy. And then this little part right here where you joined your log together, so it doesn't look quite as good as the rest of it. So when you give it to some, we'll cover it with saran wrap, and when you give it to someone just put a nice bow right there, and that will cover up that little spot that doesn't look quite as good as the rest of it. So there you are. I would love to give that to someone for Christmas.
She tries to hide it, but Lord knows it shows.